Establishing central control immediately claims important territory and opens lines for piece development. Establishing piece mobility and preparing to contest the center are immediate priorities with this knight development. Securing central space, c4 aims to dictate the pawn structure and pressure the queenside. Black solidifies the center, preparing development and offering a solid Queen's Indian or Nimzo-Indian setup if white chooses. Developing this knight efficiently bolsters kingside influence and prepares for castling, a cornerstone of solid development. Disrupting white's central control, this bishop sacrifice offers a dynamic counterplay. Safeguarding the bishop and preparing development, this move offers a clear path for knight reinforcement while subtly controlling central squares and eyeing potential pawn breaks. Challenging the central pawn structure immediately, aiming to disrupt white's comfortable setup. Sacrificing the bishop offers a dynamic pawn structure, opening the queen's diagonal for future assaults. Sacrificing pawn structure for active piece play, black hopes to disrupt white's central control. Solidifying the queenside pawn majority by preparing a kingside expansion offers white a comfortable positional advantage. Safeguarding your monarch is paramount, freeing up pieces for active participation on the board. Developing the bishop to its intended diagonal solidifies the kingside and prepares for a central pawn push, potentially aiming for e4. Solidifying the pawn structure and preparing a central pawn push, this move aims to gain space and support. Securing the monarch initiates a period of peaceful development, aiming for harmonious piece placement. Developing the knight to c6 solidifies black's pawn chain and prepares for potential kingside action. Developing the knight to its natural outpost prepares a queenside expansion while reinforcing the central pawn structure. Positioning the queen centrally enhances control over central squares and prepares for potential pawn pushes or knight transfers. Expanding the center with pawn thrust boldly claims space, aiming to break open lines for unleashed piece activity. Expanding on the queenside offers a dynamic counterplay, though it sacrifices some queenside space. Stepping out the pawn to d5 aggressively claims central territory, immediately pressuring black's pawn structure and restricting piece mobility. The knight retreats, aiming to redeploy to a more active square, a subtle dance around white's central pawn. Clearing the central tension, white invites tactical exchanges and aims to exploit the open d-file. Finally breaking the pawn chain, this bishop redeployment opens important diagonals for your queen and rooks, though it concedes significant central space. Asserting central control with the knight, white aims to restrict black's queenside expansion and prepare a kingside attack. Reclaiming the center and preparing for a queenside pawn advance with the knight is a solid, if passive, response. Reinforcing the e-file and preparing a potential kingside advance, white establishes a central presence. Aggressively challenging the center with the knight opens lines, but exposes your queenside pawns. Asserting queenside pressure, this maneuver aims to control the c-file and prepare for potential pawn advancement. Shifting the queen to c7 bolsters the kingside and prepares potential queenside action, while acknowledging the central pawn chain's firmness. The knight embarks on a quiet journey, aiming to bolster kingside defenses and potentially reinforce the central control that was relinquished. Bolstering the knight on c5, black aims to create a harmonious piece deployment, preparing to contest the central files. Positioning the knight centrally opens up avenues for attack and aims to control crucial central squares. This bishop now activates on the open file, threatening to disrupt white's queenside structure and hinting at further piece development. Solidifying the center's pawn structure, this move aims to restrict black's queenside expansion and prepare for potential kingside action. Pushing the pawn expands on the queenside, aiming to create weaknesses or secure outpost squares for knights. Averting the potential queen battery threat, the monarch consolidates, preparing to contest the open d-file with renewed vigor. Unlocking the queenside pawn chain, black creates immediate weaknesses and opens lines for an aggressive push. Securing the queenside pawn majority with a tactical pause, white solidifies their space but sacrifices crucial mobility. This aims to eventually free the b-pawn and open lines for the pieces, though it weakens the kingside light squares significantly. Consolidating the rook on the open file now prepares for a potential kingside attack or pressure on the d-file. Seeking to solidify queenside space, black aims to pressure white's central pawns and potentially open lines for the rook. Shifting the knight to a more active square prepares for central pawn breaks and supports future queenside advances. This repositions the bishop to attack white's potentially vulnerable queenside pawns and activate the piece. Seizing the d-file with the queen opens lines, but also potentially exposes her to attack. Centralizing the queen now offers excellent activity and forces white to reconsider their pawn structure. The rook now dominates the open file, eyeing potential infiltration into black's weakened queenside structure. Re-establishing the rook's active post on the d-file aims to challenge white's control and potentially create counterplay down the open corridor. Reclaiming the rook asserts dominance over the open file, preparing for potential breakthroughs. Trading the rooks here opens a clear path for black's king to escape the queenside pressure and simplify into a more manageable middle game. The rooks now dominate the open files, a crucial advantage heading into the endgame. Repositioning the knight to d7 is a flexible regrouping, aiming to either reinforce the queenside or potentially support a kingside initiative later. Pushing the f-pawn boldly aims to crack open the kingside pawn shield. Solidifying the kingside pawn structure, this move aims to prevent immediate breakthroughs and prepare for potential central pawn advances. Unlocking the queenside and reinforcing the central pawn chain is the immediate objective. Challenging white's d-file monopoly, this piece repositions for better defensive and offensive coordination. Securing the king's safety is paramount, especially with potential pawn storms brewing on the queenside. Rearranging the bishop to the queenside aims to reinforce black's pawn structure and potentially support an eventual b2 push. Reactivating the bishop on h3 aims to challenge black's isolated pawn structure and potentially disrupt their defensive setup. Reasserting presence on the queenside, this knight maneuvers for potential kingside action. The king boldly advances, seeking central influence and preparing for potential skirmishes on the open files. Reasserting knight activity, this maneuver aims to disrupt white's entrenched pieces on the kingside. Clearing a path to potentially attack black's vulnerable king, eyeing the weakened dark squares. Shifting the king to g7 prepares to untangle the rook on the now open kingside files and potentially offer it for defense. Crashing into the knight opens lines, potentially exploiting the weakened kingside structure. Reclaiming the open kingside file is paramount for your rook, otherwise the white knight controls the critical central squares. Initiating a pawn storm on the kingside aims to unravel black's defenses. Unleashing the rook along the open file reclaims initiative, a bold assertion in this material-balanced yet complex middle game. Challenging black's central pawn structure, white boldly opens avenues for their rooks. Reinvigorating the queenside pressure, e6 seeks to activate its underused pieces and prepare for counterplay. Unlocking the h-file tension, this capture offers white a decisive advantage by activating the bishop on this crucial diagonal. Recovering the bishop solidifies the pawn structure, preparing for potential king safety maneuvers. Unlocking the kingside and creating tactical possibilities with the knight's maneuver. Protecting the rook and preparing a counterattack on the kingside presents a subtle challenge. Unlocking the king's retreat route, while securing the e-pawn's advance forms the strategic core of this maneuver. Reactivating the bishop aims to dislodge the entrenched knight and gain breathing room for the black king. Unleashing knight pressure to contest the open center and force positional concessions from the black king. This knight's journey to the edge aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and create new tactical possibilities. Confronting the isolated king forces a defensive retreat, preparing to consolidate the dominant knight. A tactical jab disrupting white's kingside expansion and forcing a recapture.